Welcome to FYI, the For-Your Innovation podcast. This show offers an intellectual discussion on technologically enabled disruption, because investing in innovation starts with understanding it. To learn more, visit arc-invest.com.
ARK Invest is a registered investment advisor focused on investing in disruptive innovation. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. It does not constitute, either explicitly or implicitly, any provision of services or products by ARK. All statements made regarding companies or securities are strictly beliefs and points of view held by ARK or podcast guests, and are not endorsements or recommendations by ARK to buy, sell, or hold any security. Clients of ARK Investment Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Brainstorm. Alongside my co-host Yassine Almandra, analyst at ARK Invest, I'm your host, Rod Roudi, co-founder of Bitcoin Park, community-supported campus here in Nashville, Tennessee, focused on grassroots Bitcoin adoption, and a home for Bitcoiners to work, learn, collaborate, and build. We are now on episode number 4, and if this is your first time tuning in, let me explain what we're doing here. Thanks again to the support from Kathy, Yassine, and the ARK team. We're taking our monthly Bitcoin topic-based approach at Bitcoin Park and applying it to this new monthly podcast series we are calling Bitcoin Brainstorm. Each month, we plan to have a different topic and invite amazing people from a variety of areas within the Bitcoin community. Our aim is simple: drive conversation around Bitcoin. And after going deep into Bitcoin with the first 2 episodes, Building and Scaling and AI and Bitcoin, respectively, and with our 3rd episode, which was an absolute blast to have Dr. Art Laffer join us, we dove into some of the misconceptions associated with Bitcoin. So now we have 60 minutes approximately, and we'll be covering a lot. And I could not be more excited, as I've used their Bitcoin products and services almost daily in my personal and professional lives. So let's do some quick introductions for everyone and then jump right in. Joining Yassine and I this month, we have Alex Leishman, co-founder, CEO, and CTO of River, a Bitcoin financial services firm. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. And Dickerson, CEO of THUNDR Games, a Bitcoin game development company with the mission to make it easy to earn Bitcoin while playing games. Great to have you, Des.
Thanks for having me. This is one of my fave podcasts, so I'm excited to be here.
That's the way. That's the way. Good job. Graham Krizek, founder and CEO of Voltage, a Lightning infrastructure company. Thanks for joining us, Graham.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Absolutely. And then Tony Giorgio, co-founder and CEO of Mutiny Wallet, a self-custodial social payments app built on top of Lightning. Appreciate you being here, Tony.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Everyone here is fantastic.
Heck yeah. And Viktor Bunin, protocol specialist and leading the Lightning development efforts at Coinbase. Welcome to the show, Viktor.
Thanks so much. And sorry, I'm the only CEO, non-CEO that's here, but I'll try to make up for it with good content.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but you are leading the Lightning development efforts at Coinbase, correct?
There's a team of us that's folks in addition to me, but I'm one of the key folks, yes.
Good deal. Well, that's great. And as always, Kathy Wood, founder, CEO, and CIO at ARK Invest. How you doing, Kathy?
I'm great. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Absolutely. So Yassine, after getting through all those introductions, where do you think is the best jumping off point for us?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation, especially amongst a lot of the chatter today around Bitcoin has been, institutionalizing Bitcoin, providing efficient products to gain exposure, and really emphasizing kind of this use case of Bitcoin as this strategic allocation, like a store of value type use case that's uncorrelated with traditional asset classes. And I think in all of this chatter, we often forget some of the use cases that extend beyond just store of value, and that people are using this not just on a daily basis, but are building on top of it in a way that I think a lot of, call it traditional investors or holders, really underappreciate. So the reason why we're all gathered here today is to kind of explore some of those underrated use cases, some of the innovations that we're seeing outside of just this digital gold thesis, and really kind of discussing broader adoption trends as a whole that go beyond just thinking about the base protocol. So with that, maybe we can just dive in. What do you guys think are some of these underexplored use cases in Bitcoin? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Yeah, let's take it from there.
Maybe I'll just open up with a little bit of a obvious take, but I'm sure we're going to spend a lot of time on it, which is around taproot assets and the ability to finally have scalable stable coins on Bitcoin. I think it's something a lot of people have spent a lot of time talking about, but it's something I'd love to just kind of bring up here is that I spent a lot of time in other protocols ecosystems as well, such as Ethereum and Solana and Polygon. And if you kind of take a look around, a lot of things have kind of gone downhill over the bear market, but stablecoins is one of the things that people have continued to be bullish on and use and integrate into their business logic and services. And so I think there's like something really magical about Lightning adding stablecoin support at this point in time, because there are so many learnings already from these other ecosystems where it's like, hey, these are the use cases that are resonating. And so chief amongst them, for example, are, we spent a lot of time thinking about, what are people using in developing countries? And, the primary competitor to Lightning there is just USDT on Tron, right? Like that's the lowest cost, cheapest thing that everybody's asking for all the time. Um, and so it's really interesting because now you have, Bitcoin as a base that everybody knows and loves, and you have the ability to have a USDT on Tron type of experience on Bitcoin, and that it's, extremely fast, extremely scalable, and can be non-custodial as well. And so that's something that, already has like this really strong grassroots movement associated with it where it can capture, a lot of market share. But then that's the thing that a lot of people talk about. But then like when you move beyond that, something I'd love to see Lightning enable is some of the other things that we're starting to see. And so as one example, a lot of investments that are done in the crypto ecosystem, right? When you're investing into startups, for example, like people love just sending USDC, right? Instead of using bank accounts. Like it's way easier for funding. And so you have this ability to not only receive it, but then also like put that USDC or whatever it is, into your bank account or into a multi-sig, or like have some kind of controls over it. And so capitalizing on that use case is a huge one. Another one is everything around, tightly integrating relationships between like bank accounts and stablecoins, so you can move between them seamlessly. And that's something that Bridge XYZ is doing, for example. Like there's efforts to do that on Lightning, but something I'd love to see is how do you take these service providers that are integrating stablecoins and all these different networks and being like, hey, you have Ethereum and you have Arbitrum and you have Solana, you have whatever. Lightning should be a core component of what you're doing. And there's like a really easy way that you can start integrating that into your broader product suite and start bootstrapping some of that adoption without having to understand like a ton of your own kind of like knowledge about how Lightning works and all of its edge cases. So I'm excited for, the boots on the ground use case, but I'm also excited about integrating Lightning into all the other stuff where we're seeing a lot of uses.
Can I just ask a quick question? What would be the reason? What would be opposition to that? Any particular reason, or is this taking off pretty quickly?
For like stablecoins on Lightning, or for integration into the service providers?
Integration.
So I think on the integration side, well, the first thing is that there is no stablecoin on Lightning live yet, right? And so hopefully you'll have like a USDC or USDT that goes live, or maybe some other competitor. So that'd be the first step. I think the second step is that if you're developing predominantly for like an EVM environment, right? If you just do like EVM and Solana, you already have, something like 90% of the smart contract market share. And so you really only have to do two things, and they all kind of work like relatively in similar ways. And so just the next hurdle is going to be, okay, how do you add Lightning to the suite as well? And so that's why like I prefer for people to not have to go and learn Lightning all on their own every single time. Like it'd be really nice if there was like easier ways for them to do it so they can just like plug and play.
I'm curious, Alex, if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I think Viktor is spot on. I think the trends he's highlighting are super interesting, and I can maybe add some color in terms of sort of how to think about this higher level trend of Lightning and fiat sort of becoming a little bit more friendly. I really actually think there's two directions people are taking with this, and the first direction being this insight that there's all these crypto exchanges worldwide that have built best-in-class rails between crypto and fiat in their region or locale. And And Lightning is sort of the last connecting piece for all of these exchanges to have value that can transmit instantly between them. And so with all of these regional exchanges on Lightning, what you have is this this ability to send fiat from one place, have it converted to Bitcoin, sent instantly to another place, and have it converted back to the local currency there. Because it's happening instantly and irreversibly, unlike an on-chain payment, which can take up to 30 minutes or so, you can give a single quote for what the end-to-end sort of cost of that exchange from the sender fiat currency to the receiver fiat currency is going to be. And so we're seeing, so like Lightspark just released this universal money address to sort of kind of try and make something like this happen, where every crypto-enabled custodial financial institution worldwide can basically connect to the Lightning Network and allow their customers to send and receive fiat to any other custodial financial institution worldwide, basically fulfilling almost like the vision Ripple was trying to fulfill that it never really was able to, because they tried to get everyone to use Ripple to do this, and everyone just really wanted to use a more sort of like organic currency like Bitcoin. And so that's one sort of direction people are investing in, looking at basically Lightning kind of actually realizing what Ripple tried to do. Then there's the other sort of path, which is sort of more protocol native, which is what Viktor was talking about, of these taproot assets bringing stable coins to the Lightning Network. And so with that, you don't actually even need a custodial financial institution. You can have these Lightning nodes that have Bitcoin channels to peers, but also have dollar channels to peers. And somebody who, for example, Desiree could have a Lightning wallet, and I could have a dollar channel to her, and I could have a Bitcoin channel to Viktor, and Viktor can pay Desiree through me, and Viktor's paying Bitcoin, and Desiree is receiving dollars over Lightning, and I'm facilitating that swap, kind of non-custodially. And so that's another basically direction, that sort of more protocol native way of facilitating this decentralized fiat network. So I think that's kind of a good way to break it down.
And I think to add on to a little bit, I'm definitely seeing this trend in demand itself. There's other ways to go about it too. It doesn't even need to be taproot assets. I think DLCs are kind of the approach we're sort of taking or looking at it, where it's a discrete log contract, almost, like a smart contract on top of Bitcoin, where you and another counterparty basically lock in that, the USD dollar amount, but it's all backed by the Bitcoin itself. So, it involves having oracles to do the price checking, but it's essentially just, a bet between two parties, and they pretty much agree on the price, or have that oracle, mention the price. And then if, the price swings in one way or another, the balance between the Bitcoin balance between the two parties shifts as well to lock in that USD value. Like there's a lot of ways to get there. I think taproot assets is an interesting way. And I think, we're going to start building out some more DLC technology to kind of, see this play out on our side. We have companies like 10-10-1, who's also trying to do it in a trading atmosphere as well, where you lock up the DLCs on Lightning itself, and then you can buy more Bitcoin, sell more Bitcoin, lock in that price through that DLC smart contract. So I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. I think even a naive way to go about it is just to do normal swaps. Have some swapping third party in the middle, but I think doing it as much as we can at a protocol level through DLCs or taproot assets could unlock a lot of different use cases.
I think also, to chime in, that when it comes to like use cases, it's, especially since Berlin, the use cases for Bitcoin and for Lightning have like really matured, and we're looking at a lot of people and businesses building, and not just working on use cases that we're building with Bitcoin for the sake of building with Bitcoin. We're actually solving like real problems in the market. We're actually meeting like real user demand. And I think that's a big thing with stable coins. And, like that's something that we'll eventually need at Thunder. But, I think we're going to see this entire ecosystem really mature in that way. I mean, and that's kind of how we approach it at Thunder with, thinking about use cases. Like, we created the micro incentive rewards in the games as a monetization tool for game developers. Post ATT policy changes in the App Store and IDFA changes, developers could no longer really monetize, especially in hyper casual. And so if there's a way to incentivize longer retention, grow your LTV while still, sharing some of that revenue to keep those people around, we're able to do that using Bitcoin, and there's no other way to do it outside of using the Lightning Network. And similar with our new product Clinch, which is like the peer-to-peer non-custodial depositless wagering, there's no other way to do it without the Lightning Network. And we're really, rather than just doing it because it's cool, because it's Bitcoin, we're doing it because Bitcoin really has these really unique properties that helps us solve a business problem where, wagering today, there's just like really high buy-ins, cash out thresholds, there's min and max bet sizes, payouts are incredibly slow, and that's all because of the friction associated with the traditional fiat rails. And we're able to use Lightning, which really allows you to make incredibly small payments, instant cash outs. We're able to really solve problems that so many users see in just like the wagering, online casino, and sports betting realm. And so I think that's what's really important. And I'm seeing a lot of, just from like colleagues in the space, is that like, it's not just building for the sake of Bitcoin, it's really building because Bitcoin allows us to solve problems in the real world, which I think is really powerful.
Is this more of a developed world, or is the developing world getting involved? I just don't know your business well enough.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our users, I would say, are in Latin America or the Asian Pacific region. And that's, why we built our newest product Clinch, is because those individuals can't partake in a social competitive type of gameplay because of the traditional fiat rails, because there are regional restrictions. But when you are operating on Lightning, you don't have those restrictions anymore. So it is, for us, very much largely developing regions.
Awesome. I'll throw in just my take here, and I think I'm going to take it in a completely different direction of something that I feel like is talked about a lot in the Lightning space, but I don't think we've seen a lot of like real use cases, and that's more machine-to-machine payments. So things like AI or energy consumption, these kinds of like autonomous systems that can kind of pay a vendor like automatically based on consumption, all these things. It's kind of a use case that people talk about a lot in Lightning, but there's not actually a lot of people kind of incorporating it in that way. We see some early ones like Sonoda, who is doing it for kind of miners and energy. And then we've seen some like L402 type stuff. But so it's not necessarily a new use case because the use case has always been there, but actually exploring that and being able to enable that for a lot of new applications, I think is a big unlock for things like, getting rid of kind of like the net 30, net 60 day payment cycles and all of that stuff. If you have the ability of paying an invoice daily and doing that for virtually no cost, and have it be finalized instantly, I mean, why would a business not want to be a part of a system like that? And so, I think that there's a lot of things that can be built out inside of kind of this machine to machine world, which I think that we could all probably agree is, the machines aren't going away. We're not going to be replaced, but they're not going to go away. So I think increasing the ability for those to kind of interact, I think is going to be a really popular use case over time. And we're going to see actually people starting to build real solutions around that in the coming months and years.
I'll actually take a little bit of the opposite side of that. I'm bearish on machine to machine, not because it's not a good use case, but just when I think about kind of like a timeline perspective and how much of a problem it is, I'm just like, existing payment systems and Rails, like if you can just aggregate a bunch of payments into a monthly bill that just gets billed to a credit card, not that it's like the better version of it, but it's one of those things where it's like, it works well enough that unless there was like a really high benefit to changing it, people are just not really going to bother. And there's not enough, I think, examples of like the machine to machine kind of like, okay, like there's so many examples of this, like really the bar is being met and like somebody's going to take the lead on it. I think I'm more bullish on that, on like maybe like a 10-year time horizon more than I am like a 2 to 3 year time horizon. I think like in the 2 to 3 year, I'm like more of the benefits accrue to how do you use these payment rails where other payment rails are like really terrible. And so there's like a marked difference of like 10 to 100x better. Whereas here it's like, yes, it's better, but then there's like a whole bunch of counter examples where it's like better or worse, you know? Like I was talking about like paying for AWS, right? Like you're using a particular function or using a whatever, or like an AI query where it's computing an answer for you, and so you're actually consuming machine resources. Like, yes, in some sense, you'd like to be paid immediately when that happens. But in the other sense, if you're ChatGPT, you love a monthly subscription because a lot of people forget to use it or they like underutilize it, right? And so like, is it a bad enough problem that you're like, hey, I need to switch to this like pay as you go model? And a lot of the time the answer is like, maybe, maybe not. It's not super clear.
Yeah, just one point there. I agree. The sort of pay as you go or the streaming sets is perhaps not a big enough, I would say, improvement to traditional Rails where you're going to see that switch. But what about sort of, I think back to Dez's points around Bitcoin offering these inherent properties that the traditional financial system simply does not offer because that's not how it's set up. I'm thinking specifically about sort of the irreversibility and the settlement guarantees that you see in a sort of decentralized protocol. So things like chargebacks, I'd say, is a really interesting use case where if you have these autonomous agents that have no incentive, or you can basically circumvent and create chargebacks in a way that the traditional rails can't avoid. Something like integration with Bitcoin or this P2P network, where you have these autonomous agents talking to each other, and they know that there are rules to the protocol where if you're going to make a payment, it's irreversible. Doesn't that lend itself to much more efficient allocation of resources and an ability for, let's say, machines to communicate at scale in a way that they can't today? Or am I missing something?
Yeah, but I think machine to machine is like not a big enough use case today. I think a lot of the time it's like what it's essentially being is business to business, right? And then that business has a bunch of machines, and the businesses are the ones that are really, agreeing on terms and pricing and all that stuff. I think with like Dez's example, where Lightning enables you to do something that you can't do otherwise, like that is a strongly agree and super obvious thing. But with a lot of examples that are not that, if the improvement is not like 10 to 100x and it's kind of marginal, then it's not super clear. And even the example with chargebacks, I actually both like and don't like that one because chargebacks exist because consumers want them, right? Like that's why they're there. And so it's not like a value prop to be like, hey, consumer, there's no chargebacks available here, because like a lot of people actually really like having the ability to do a chargeback. I agree that it's appealing to the merchant, but also like there was a recent, I don't know if it was you, Alex, that wrote it in like one of the River posts about how like there can be a new payment type on Lightning that is like temporary hold or whatever it is. It doesn't like complete, but it can be charged back. Is that in one of the articles on like 2025?
It might have been. I don't remember that one exactly, but possibly.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, like I agree with the sentiment of like if it's a big enough problem to solve. Like I don't think the world is gonna switch their Netflix bill to like paying over Lightning like tomorrow. Like, yeah, that's probably not going to be a real thing. But I think inside of like, again, going back to the Sonoda example where there's like, you use electricity for a month and then you have like 60 days past that month to pay it. And there's a lot of discrepancies where there's like arguments between like how much did you consume? Was there like a leak if it's like a water system or something like that? And I think if you can reduce the time to settle a lot, I think that increases. I think the need is stronger there. And I think that you would be able to I think settling like ACHs every day is like possible, kind of annoying. And then if you can like automate the systems, like it's there's levels to like, is that business to business? Is that machine to machine? I think there's a lot of things that you can apply it to, but I also agree with the sentiment of like things like what Des said around like the things that the protocol can enable that is unique to a given region or demographic or something is like definitely the earlier fruit that should be kind of taken.
Yeah, I just listening to this, I think one of the reasons I asked Des the question is it does seem like this is more of an emerging markets where the risks inherent in, getting paid, let's say, are so much higher. So taking the steps out and basically getting everyone, used to the rules of the game, permanent, immutable, and so forth. You're taking the risks. We talk about the toll takers in between merchants and consumers in the U.S., where the rails are good enough. All of those 7 toll takers in the middle are there because they're trying to diminish the risk of the associated with the transaction. So peer-to-peer in emerging markets, given the enormity of the risks there, would seem to make more sense.
Yeah, I think one of Kathy, to sort of add on to that, one of the, I think, insights that everyone intuitively knows, but I don't know has been fully realized yet, and I think Coinbase is doing a lot of work to actually to realize this, is with Bitcoin and crypto in general, you don't need this whole stack of companies like you're talking about. The account, the asset is a whether you want to say a bearer asset or whatever term you want to use, it's all just there, and when you make the transaction, it goes to where it needs to go. You don't have all these chains of promises and credit, and when the money is credit, that's required. But with crypto, you can actually just kind of the bank can also be the payment processor, which is interesting.
Maybe going back to Victor's first point, just around Taro and what it's going to take for, let's say, for us to see the first stablecoin, because I think the Taproot asset that was initially proposed in, I think, April of last year. We've seen a year and a half go by. Victor, what is it going to take, let's say, to see sort of that first ubiquitous stablecoin on Bitcoin? Is it like a circle that's going to need to commit resources? Do you think that this is potentially a tether, or is it an entirely new beast in and of itself?
Yeah. So obviously, I'm just sharing on my own behalf, but I think that there's really only like 2 players in the stablecoin game, which is USDC and USDT. And I think that one really nice thing is, if you look back historically, USDT was originally entirely based on top of Bitcoin, right? And so that was where all the supply was and all the activity. It moved to Ethereum and other general purpose platforms for speed and all kinds of different reasons. But when you're talking about kind of moving back to Lightning, right, or having something launch on Lightning, it's not this cold start problem where it's hey, you have a brand new blockchain and there's not a ton of activity there and da-da-da-da-da. You really get a lot of the benefits of being part of the Bitcoin community, being part of this expanding Lightning network, being able to use the same payment channels that regular BTC transactions on Lightning use. And so because you don't have this cold start problem, that actually makes, I think, the business case, and you have this history of adoption, it makes the business case to add support that much more powerful. And so I think that's one huge advantage that stablecoins on Lightning have. And I think the other component of it is that there's a little bit of a race always, I think, between USDC and USDT. And that if a particular stablecoin launches first, it'll tend to get adoption first, right? And so you have this network effects that happen on any blockchain. And so when you have something that's this appealing, where you're hey, there's a real opportunity here to get ahead. And I don't know anybody's plans or anything like that, but I think each team can make a really strong case for launching as soon as possible. And the very last thing I'll say is that you see other stablecoin providers kind of launching, and you have the PayPal USD, and I'm sure other ones as well. I think those folks also have a really cool opportunity, because they're so far behind in all the other markets where stablecoins exist that it's hey, they should be paying attention to this thing as well. So there's a really nice activation threshold there.
I guess one of my questions then, and this is for the broader group like Des as well as Tony and Graham, then, if there's broader adoption on the payments rail with Lightning, is there going to be support for any of these other rails to do stable sats, or does this all consolidate back to Bitcoin and everything goes to zero outside of Bitcoin?
That's kind of my perspective. We're exploring what it would look like to be able to support these things, but still have the Bitcoin ethos and the Bitcoin mentality at play here. So, we might have some early thing where it's just hey, move over, your shit coins into our wallet. We have swapping services where you can just hold everything in Bitcoin or hold everything in a DLC, Bitcoin DLC. And then if you need to interact with other services, if you're interacting with merchants that only want USDT on Tron or something. You can still pay them out. I'm more interested in supporting the kind of use case of like, hey, hold Bitcoin, use it, have it as the asset, have it as the thing that you can, rely upon. Sure, if you want that USD value instead, you can support that with a DLC. But otherwise, if you need to interact with things just on a daily basis, you can still interact with them, but still hold true to wanting to be Bitcoin only, have that digital gold aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the goal is for everything to zero out to Bitcoin, right? But I think it's really interesting. I mean, for us, we really kind of meet users at the very, very beginning of their journey. 80% of our users are totally new to Bitcoin. This is the first time they've ever touched it. And we try and make that as simple as an experience as possible, and make the UX as kind of akin to anything they'd see in another game, or another wallet that they would see with fiat in another game. But it is difficult, and so I think for us, especially with our Clinch, this wagering product, we are really excited about showing users in the beginning of fiat front end. They are just coming to the games because they want to win Bitcoin, or win it's really the idea of winning some type of free currency. They don't necessarily care up front. So if we can show them the fiat part and it's easier for them to onboard, we can slowly kind of strip away the fiat skin and show them the Bitcoin eventually. And that's what we're kind of doing now anyways. It's they come, they see the Bitcoin, they do a whole custodial onboarding, but we eventually introduce them to safer, more secure, cold storage solutions. So in my mind, it's I think it's this really interesting opportunity to onboard more no coiner users, and eventually transition them to operating totally in Bitcoin someday when we all achieve that dream.
Yeah, I think I'll maybe add on to what Des was saying is basically Bitcoin is nobody's unit of account. I think anyone who's worked on any real consumer product knows at the end of the day, most people really just want dollars, and it's really just a time frame question. I think a lot of us agree Bitcoin is the end all be all at the end of the day, but the products we build now, face this market reality. And how do you traverse that time frame given that we don't really know how long it lasts? And it's an interesting challenge and optimization problem.
Yeah, and I'll be maybe a little bit contrarian of I don't think everything else will go to zero. The reality is that when you have stablecoins on Lightning, they're very, very good at if compared to driving, right, on roads, if you're taking the same route to and from work every day and it's highly trafficked, fantastic, it's super useful for you. That's the way I think about Lightning channels, right? Super high, traffic, super high throughput, the roads that you're kind of going down. But when you get outside of that, right, and you want programmability and you want DeFi and you want a whole bunch of stuff, then all of a sudden, these are things that are not really possible on Lightning. And so as a one really specific example, let's say you're a business that's accepting stablecoins. You accept stablecoins and they're just sitting on chain. I think over time, there's not going to be the concept of cashing out to a bank account. All activity is going to happen on chain, whether it's on Lightning or on ETH or somewhere else, or probably across a number of them. And so as you get paid in USDC or whatever it is, right, you put it into Aave or you put it into Compound, you put it into lending protocol. So it's earning you additional yield as it's just sitting there waiting for you. And so I think that what we're going to see over time is that businesses will use multiple different blockchains depending on the utility that blockchain provides them. And so I think Lightning is going to be a huge component of that, but I think that it's has not been shown to be true that means that everything else will not be used. If anything, other things also have a ton of use cases and will continue to.
Yeah, I'd echo Victor here. I think ultimately, in many ways, Bitcoin is a beast of its own. So to even to compare it to other protocols is an apples to oranges comparison. There are specific use cases. I'd say Bitcoin's settlement guarantees, its high fidelity assurances make it ultimately there needs to be a trade-off between those guarantees and call it the composability of their programmability. But maybe on just the broader infrastructure, state of Lightning Network infrastructure, where are we? Graham, maybe we can start with you. Give a little rundown of what you're doing at Voltage, and I'd say providing an overview over the last few years about how Lightning Network infrastructure has grown and matured would be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So like us as an organization, we're like a Bitcoin infrastructure provider. So we run nodes for Bitcoin layer 1, Lightning, liquidity, all of the things that you would need to incorporate Lightning into your business. I mean, when we started like over 3 years ago, I mean, Lightning was still, it was still a little nascent. There's still a lot of edges to work out. Luckily, we've been, working through as a ecosystem to really make the infrastructure more robust, so you can kind of meet the needs of Coinbase types and whatnot. So from the infrastructure layer, like that's been super positive. I think to kind of round out to what we were talking about just a little bit ago, things like taproot assets are super interesting. Like doing taproot assets on side of Lightning isn't even possible today. It's only like layer 1 available today, and so I think that we're still there's still a lot to go in terms of like actually enabling a lot more of the types of services that we're talking about today, which I think is exciting, and that we see this much demand without it even being available yet. And I think there's also a lot of protocol improvements that have been happening to make this all easier. So things like splicing to make liquidity management much easier, and build out a lot of opportunities for things like the non-custodial mobile use case, which was maybe really, when we started, like that was a very challenging thing to actually accomplish, where today it's much more achievable with things like LDK and whatnot. So I think overall, from like the state of like infrastructure, like we've come a long way from where we were several years ago. And I think where we're actually able to like sufficiently kind of handle the amount of demand that we're seeing as a network. And then there's also to the point of like, I think, is everything going to Bitcoin or not? I mean, I think that, I think everyone can have their opinions on that, but I think that there's, to look at Bitcoin and Lightning and see it as it exists today and think that that's the final state would be very, very naive. Like there's a lot of enhancements that are proposed, that are being worked on, and all those different things. And so, if stablecoins on Lightning beat out Tron, like what is there enough activity on Tron for it to exist as a chain? I don't know. I haven't really looked into it that much. But I think that that's a prime example of, as we look at Bitcoin and Lightning evolving, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to solve like the use cases that actually have demand inside of the world, really. And so, to summarize, I think that we've come a long way from like the robustness of infrastructure, what you can do and how you can operate inside of Lightning today. And then looking towards the future, there's a huge amount of things that are either proposed or being worked on that are going to unlock a lot of new possibilities inside of like stablecoins, as well as making just the protocol of Lightning much easier to use and much more efficient to use as well, from like an on-chain perspective, onboarding new users, all of those things. So I think it's a very exciting time. There's a lot, we've come a long way, and there's a huge amount of possibility in front of us as well.
One of the metrics we like to look at is the number of developers, and over time, the number of developers on Ethereum has really taken off, and while the number on Bitcoin generally it's still moving up, it was the slope had changed and flattened out. Have all of the developments that you're talking about on the Lightning Network change that dynamic? Are we starting to see an inflection point with more Bitcoin developers here?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so, especially when you think about like ordinals and all of those things. I mean, those kind of came and they haven't went, but they're not as popular as they were. But I think that is just a prime example of like a new thing that was possible. And there's a big flood of developers that came in for that. I don't have any numbers on like, percent increase or anything like that, but it was very, very obvious. There's a lot of people participating in the ecosystem that maybe were new or weren't, Bitcoin developers before that. And so, I think that it has definitely had a positive impact on the developer ecosystem. And I think that will only continue as we work through, more tooling and possibilities.
Yeah, I think if you just even look at like some of these hackathons, or just like the Wolf program, there's just so many more like people applying. Like, I mean, I believe it was a hackathon recently. There was like 200 people that submitted ideas, and yeah, maybe they're not like building those out in full, but I think I know it's nothing compared to the scale of Ethereum, but it has grown significantly to like since like 2019 at the Lightning conference in Berlin. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the roundtable that we did there. I think it was like 9 people. Alex, were you there? I mean, it was like very, very few, like real tiny little businesses building on L&D at the time. And so it's really incredible in my mind to see, 200 ideas of just people kind of hacking around. I think that's kind of a big deal, but like also it's hard to build on Bitcoin. I think everybody knows here it's a little bit harder for good reason. We've made the trade-offs for many reasons, security, robustness, whatnot. But I think there is something to be said for like the type of people who are building in Bitcoin. There is a lot of, I like to think, quality over quantity here.
And I think Tony was one of the 9 developers in Berlin amongst those folks.
No, I wasn't even doing any Lightning things at the time. I just was trying to get into it really. But I think along the same lines of infrastructure, I mean, even just businesses that specialize in different parts of the Lightning stack today. I mean, we're all in different verticals basically on the Lightning stack, and just the fact that we're building a Lightning wallet now that we're powering the front end of it, we're doing the development of that, but like on the same on the same vein, like Voltage is our liquidity provider, so like we're not I think when you saw the early days in 2019, everyone had to build their own vertical stack. Everyone had to be a Lightning wallet, and then they had to provide liquidity, and they had to run routing nodes, and they had to like build the front end services and the apps around their wallets. Like all of that you had to do on your own. And then, Alex, I think you guys showed off the in your Lightning report recently, like a huge explosions in Lightning companies that just got funded over the last year. And as it's like, I could get it wrong, but it looked like 10x the amount of Lightning specific companies as previous year. So I think like infrastructure, like, there are the protocol development, developers, but I think even when you look at businesses and the developers they have on staff and the sort of verticals that they're trying to integrate with, I think it's way more robust than it's ever been. And it enables us to, take advantage of everyone's infrastructure. And we come in and solve our piece of the puzzle and then, bring in everyone else.
Des, you bring up a really interesting point on the dynamics and the nature of a developer on Bitcoin, let's say, versus Ethereum, where you're acknowledging that it's harder and arguably not more cost effective to be building on Bitcoin. But the reason why is that there are certain assurances that you don't get anywhere else. I think we're seeing a much different dynamic where you're seeing a lot of people, after realizing how high fees were on Ethereum, like switching over to Solana. And I've seen the dynamics there where they're kind of agnostic of any chain. They just want faster, better, cheaper. The question is, where does that stop? So if it's not Solana, then it might be the next thing. If it's not Ethereum, it might be Solana. Whereas I think with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin developers, and Tony, you actually mentioned this too, just around the ethos and the nature of why you're building on Bitcoin. It's a much different dynamic. So even if the sheer count is lower, it's the stickiness, I think, is much higher. And I think a lot of people don't really fully appreciate that. Yeah.
I mean, we don't get to just print our own money and do the fancy marketing and to give it out away to everyone to come build on it. I mean, that's and then it's arguable that there's even use cases even there besides all the hype and the marketing and the speculation on the price. Like that's, at the end of the day, that's a big value for the shit coins in the space is, can they print their own money, attract enough of a market and user base, and then exploit it as much as possible. Like we don't have that. We're not building that kind of system. So, it is a lot harder to kind of prove out, what we're doing and that it's the right approach. And, you're not going to just get scammed a few months down the line.
Is that why? I mean, you all probably believed in Bitcoin, a long, long, long time ago. So you may have started, but among all of you, were you attracted to the Lightning Network just because of all the scams and trying to avoid and get into the most robust, secure ecosystem, or had you already bought in?
I mean, I can speak to River. We were I think the first Bitcoin exchange in the US to support Lightning. We've always been Bitcoin only, so we were already bought into Bitcoin and focusing on its use case as a store of value and eventually a medium of exchange. So for me, Lightning was just exciting because it was, I thought it was going to really help Bitcoin take that next step and from a store of value into a medium of exchange or help accelerate that. So that's what most excited me. I mean, for me, I've always been very realistic. Bitcoin is purpose built. It's specific to do one thing and do it really, really well. I don't think it's ever going to have the same amount of developer interest as Ethereum, because you can't experiment as much because it's meant to just do one thing really. So but that's what excited me about it.
That's so much of the beauty I find. I mean, obviously, like, when you're building a business, like hyper focus is like absolutely essential. And that's what I love about Bitcoin is it's like really just trying to be a better money. It does kind of check the box for so many different things. But like for us, it's like, when we come to building games with, rewards in them, we're not messing around with like NFTs and tokens and all of this that just kind of complicate things. We're like literally just adding a value layer back to games, and making it so incredibly simple. And it's like, let's solve one thing first and then we can kind of go from there. And so I think we're just touching the surface with what Bitcoin can do right now. So like, let's let it kind of grow and flourish, and do its thing before we start trying to do too much more. And that's what really kind of, attracted myself and, my co-founder to Bitcoin.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and something that I'll say is, there's probably people on this call that would call me a shitcoiner, and I think that's totally fine, because I do have a lot of exposure to other ecosystems. I think it's like a little bit naive to be like, hey, everything else is a scam, and this is the only thing that's not a scam. I think the reality is that different communities have different values, right, and different value props. And so, whereas Bitcoin is building the best money in the world, right, and the best way to transfer money in the world, what Ethereum is trying to do is build a credibly neutral blockchain on which anybody can build whatever they want. And so, like, you do have that, extremely sometimes too expressive of a language, that really enables you to be extremely creative and come up with use cases. And you have something like, Uniswap that allows you to switch between any currencies that you want, right? Any tokens, anything that is, being generated, and do that in a completely permissionless, completely decentralized, completely unstoppable way. And so, there's real value to building that credibly neutral layer that allows anybody to build what they want. And like, even looking at something like Solana, like their values are really straightforward. They want to be the cheapest and the fastest. Like, they just want to be an app platform. They're not trying to make Sol, the token, into money. They're not trying to be like, hey, we have this, grand mission to have everybody use, Solana for everything. They just want to build a great, dApp platform. And they just make different choices along the way. And once you start engaging with those communities, like, you're welcome to disagree. And I disagree with a lot from each of the communities. But it's important to realize, like, 99% of the people in each of these things are building things that they want to build for people that, they want them to use it. There's a small cohort in every community, and the Bitcoin community has it as well, that talks nonsense and, is scammy and misleads people. But it's all of our jobs as community leaders, everywhere that we are, to make sure that we, put up the right banner. And it's like, hey, no, we are building something, as Desiree said, like, we are building something that adheres to the values of this community, that, like, people want to use, that, like, makes a lot of sense and is trying to be a good actor in the space.
That's why I love competition. Competition is such a beautiful thing. And at the end of the day, the best products, services will win ultimately. And that's why, like, just hopefully this is not a tangent, but I actually have used or currently use in my daily life and I said this in the pre-show, every single one of your guys' products. Coinbase was the first place I bought sats. Des, I love you, and also have a little bit of a sore spot because of how addictive your gaming app is. Gaming apps. I mean, it's such an amazing business. You take the traditional amazing games like Snake and you Bitcoinify it and put that as a reward mechanism. I mean, Graham and Tony is the wallet of choice, where I am going to take up Dr. Laffer and buy him a cup of coffee here at Bitcoin Park, and I'm going to use my Mutiny wallet to do that. And it's powered, the POS here at Bitcoin Park is powered by Voltage. And then those sats, that people pay, they go into my River account, and it's a beautiful transaction right over there. Alex, please, mi familia labels on transactions. That would be fantastic for a business owner. But I'll say this: it's so, not to be glass half full. There's so many amazing stories that are being developed in the Bitcoin world. or because of people on this call that are developing and creating the world that they want to. So maybe just I'm curious to know some of the stories like that may be untold from each of your guys' perspectives that kind of blew you back with people using your products and services.
I'll jump in super quick, but we're really lucky to be very consumer facing. And people get very passionate about games. And so we all the time are tagged in like photos and videos of people literally with their grandmas or their moms, showing them like they're playing solitaire and they're like, my mom is literally addicted. She has a problem now. Like, can you please send help? But they learn about Bitcoin for the first time and they download Wallet of Satoshi or, whatever wallet of choice they decide picking. So it's really cool to just see people use our games as a way to onboard people to the Lightning Network. I know my dad's girlfriend, she used to play solitaire for like an hour plus a night on Skills platform, trying to win real money rewards. And she switched over to our solitaire and she plays 2 hours a night and wins Bitcoin. It would be nice if she didn't like fleece us, but she's like cashing out. But it's really cool to see, actually visibly see the 80% of people who are really learning about Bitcoin for the first time when playing our games.
Well, I mean, I think for me, it's two. I think one, sort of the big trend is still blows me away, which is Bitcoin. The amount of people just buying Bitcoin through us and saving in Bitcoin, just is, the growth is parabolic, even in a bear market, and it's wild. And so I think that is one of the biggest macro narratives that is going to have very big impacts on the world. And that always just blows me away. And that trend, when you extrapolate it and the implications geopolitically, just in the United States alone, the second, third order implications are huge, some completely unpredictable. It's just going to be a very interesting future.
Yeah, I think on our side, I mean, we're still early in development, we're still in beta, but I think even just one thing, and it kind of goes back to the unexpected use cases of Bitcoin. I think the social aspect is going to end up being a lot more important than I think we've seen in the wallet space before. Desiree, the Thunder Games is very much a social aspect as well, and there's so much social apps in this world that we can all kind of almost get our share of the pie. Really, I mean, we're heavily integrated with the whole Nostr ecosystem, where there's a lot of open source, open platform social media stuff, and I think just the idea that we can pretty much build our own open source, open platform Venmo competitor built on top of Bitcoin and Lightning. I think that's huge. So we still have a long way to go to like prove that out and start having those wow stories, I think. But even just early indications, we're just trying to be the self-custodial space, it is very difficult to build that out fully. I mean, there's custodians here, not that that's easy either. That comes with its own set. But just the idea of what you can give your users in a custodial atmosphere is a UX that is just almost the gold standard, really. So we have a lot of ways to improve, but I think that's our main goal, is to show that, with enough tech, with enough brain power, we can start to kind of mimic what a custodial experience is like in a non-custodial experience. So we extrapolate all the channels. We we even have a progressive web app, so you can scan a QR code and get adopted to Bitcoin right away, all non-custodially. I think we have to make that as easy as possible. I mean, there will always still be custodians, but if there's no self-custodians, then that we're in a world of hurt.
And maybe one thing that I'll plug, Bitcoin and Lightning related, but lately Coinbase has been trying to fight the good fight with ensuring that there's sensible regulations and sensible policies and all that stuff. And one thing I'm very thankful for is that the Bitcoin and Lightning communities are so large and so passionate and have so much conviction about their beliefs that something that I appreciate and I want to continue asking for is that you please continue to engage with regulators and with politicians. There's a lot of different avenues in which you can do that, but just make your voices heard. Coinbase helps support a thing called standwithcrypto.org. And so if you sign up there, you'll get notified, if it's something that you can do locally, or if you can reach out to the IRS or other things on hot topic issues. And so please help us, harness this passion that you have for Bitcoin, and help push, pro Bitcoin and pro crypto regulation and policies, not only in the United States, but also globally.
Just to piggyback off that, I was so anti getting engaged with even local politicians to any of these folks. But here at Bitcoin Park, we've been, we do these meetups, we get 100, 200 folks to show up. BitDevs now is getting crazy large too. But then we had all of a sudden, a lot of these teams, the staffers would come to these meetups, and they would sit there, ask questions, engage with the community. And at first I'm my spidey sense was all right, what's your angle? What are you trying to do here? But they kept on showing up and showing up and showing up. And now, here in Tennessee, we're engaged with top, down, left, and right. You can name whichever one, in a positive way to be. I think, Victor, to your point, it's imagine being one of these politicians. They get they got to be quote unquote experts on trucking regulations to, what's happening in their local river, to the local energy sources. And then all of a sudden you throw this word Bitcoin and crypto, and then you got SBF's face there, and they're like, okay, hands up, we got to stop. So I guess my long-winded way of saying is it doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. You're just engaging and being a resource for these folks, I think can go a long, long way.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And one more plug, standwithcrypto.org. Please sign up. We'd love your support. We'd love to empower you to reach out.
Maybe because I think Yassine, we're getting near the end, and I really want to ask this question because we got so many creators here. All right. And Kathy, this is actually a really good fourth episode, because on the episode 3, we had Dr. Laffer, who was just pinging away with amazing questions. And then on episode 2, we had Paul Etoy and the number of folks just talking about big brain stuff of where the world could go with L402, and a number of and I'm a big fan of the machine to machine side, but I wanted to save that debate for another time, folks. And then on the first side with Obi talking about Fetty and Layer 3 and Jack and the rest. For this group, and just to discuss where, and I think Graham said it well with the starting voltage 3 years ago and seeing where it is today. All right, 5 years. Oh my God, I can't even believe I'm going to say this. My daughter in 10 years will be driving a freaking car. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm imagining my daughter. What's that? Kathy, you're on mute, but
Kathy's on mute, but I think she's going to say
she's giving me amazing feedback right now, motherly feedback, which I need.
It's going to be
autonomous.
Oh yeah, autonomous.
You don't have to worry.
I don't have to worry?
No.
Okay. I do want to teach her how to drive a car still, but I agree with that. But with my autonomous car, which I'll be paying machine to machine with my Optimus robot, and worrying about nothing in life because everything is super dialed in. From your guys' perspective, and by the way, I will say this, one thing I'm nervous about, and Dr. Laffer brought it up many freaking times on the last podcast, was around privacy and anonymity. He kept on going back to that point, which was really profound to me. With all his experiences serving 4 of the last 6 presidents, he kept on going back to that. So as you're thinking about 5 to 10 years out, A, how do we preserve it? And B, what does the world look like?
How do we preserve privacy?
How do we preserve privacy and anonymity? And maybe a level up is how do we preserve the freedoms that made America the best place to live? Right? Because we got all of these trade-offs that we're looking at from protocol development, and where we're you may use a custodial wallet, but now you're trading off your personally identifiable information for self-assurances here or there. We're gonna, Kathy just said, robo taxis and fully autonomous. What's the trade-off look like there, and how are ways that we could, instead of trading off entire privacy and anonymity, maybe there's another thing that I'm not thinking about?
In my opinion, we have to repeal a lot of laws and shift the culture. We have to repeal the Bank Secrecy Act, and we have to get rid of a lot of these, or seriously cut back a lot of these government agencies. But that's not going to happen without a culture shift. I'm not super bullish on that, to be honest. With like in 5 years, maybe we can shift it, but the incentives don't seem to sort of lean that way for how Washington operates, which I've gotten to see quite up close, more than I thought I would. I'm actually not super optimistic about that.
Yeah, and from our perspective, make self-custodial great. Have those sort of exit rails. Have fallback plans. Have control your own custody. Don't upload your keys to a server in the EU where the police can where the police can swipe them. The recent FinCEN proposals. If you're not bullish, investing more into self-custodial usage is the top priority. There's a lot of Bitcoin flaws when it comes to privacy. Some of the on-chain usage, Lightning privacy can be a whole lot better. There's no arguing that, but it's a hell of a lot better than being outside than being inside the banking system. So when they come knocking on all of the doors, who are the first that they're going to be knocking on, basically. So, and then if there's not any way to have this exit strategy, if there's not any way to have self-custodial usage, then, there's almost no point to Bitcoin besides a speculative asset.
In my mind, Bitcoin's the only thing that we can do, or I feel like it's in my power to keep my privacy and, my autonomy. I live in DC. We have people try and break into our home. So we have to have security and monitoring systems, which also collect a bunch of data on us. And it's just a never ending spider web of trying to maintain privacy while still engaging in the real world. And for me, the only thing that gives me hope that actually makes me feel like I have some control over who I am as an individual in society is the fact that I have control over my Bitcoin and my spending power. And maybe I can't spend it everywhere now, but in a future that could be beautiful, Bitcoin will be spent. And then a future that could be really scary. It makes me feel safe knowing that I have Bitcoin and can kind of operate outside of a very controlled realm. I know that's also very negative as well. We definitely sound like doomsday preppers here, guys, but that's okay.
But I will say this, and Graham, I don't know, you want to just chime in real quick as well?
I was just gonna give my take on it, and it's a challenging topic to not get kind of dystopian on. But I think there's the enforcement, which is, I agree with what Alex said on Bank Secrecy Act and all these things, and there's also the technology on what benefits can the technology provide for preserving privacy, for allowing for easier self-custodial aspects and all those things. And I think that's and also a big part that a lot of people could probably get involved in. I mean, some of it's, protocol development is it's a thing that not everyone is cut out for. But I think if we can focus as a community on building things in the best way to preserve the values of Bitcoin and Lightning, that's going to be our best way to control our own, destiny as far as privacy and anonymity go. So really, if the protocol itself doesn't support what you want from a privacy perspective, well, then there's everything above that is obviously able to kind of see all of the same things. So we need to build it at this lower level, which is the protocol, to enable us to do, privacy preserving things. And so I think that there's which maybe doesn't change the enforcement at all. Maybe they're going to still try and do the same things, which is a very unfortunate reality we've seen with the Tornado Cash stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that, there's a separation between the enforcement and the protocol. And I think if we don't focus on doing the best that we can on the protocol level, everything else is there's no point. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. And maybe I'll take the other side of this, and that I am not a doomsday person. I'm actually very hopeful about what can happen with Bitcoin and Lightning in the United States and regulatory environment, all that stuff. I think the way that I look at it is that there's a talk that Andreas Antonopoulos, who is a Bitcoin and crypto educator, gave, where he talked about how banks have been deputized by the government to carry out its will. And it's not just banks, there's a whole bunch of financial and other intermediaries that carry out enforcement and carry out all these things that there's just not the manpower and resources to do otherwise. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I'm actually a little bit of an accelerationist of like, let's get Lightning as big as possible and as fast as possible, and like essentially get as many eyes on it as possible so we can be solving the what I think is the number one issue, which is like non-custodial support has to be like as extraordinary as it can possibly be. Because when I look at, kind of like what's the red line between, if you're just like a technology provider, and this is not legal or regulatory or any other kind of advice, obviously. But when I think about red lines, like potentially be drawn of like, where are you a financial service provider? Where are you a technology provider? Like, what are the risk assumptions that you give to users? A lot of that comes down to custody. A lot of that comes down to trust. A lot of that comes down to like this customer relationship, right? Versus you're giving somebody a view into the blockchain. And again, just my personal view. But I think it's incredibly important that, for Lightning especially, but also every other ecosystem, that non-custodial support is as good as it can possibly be, as decentralized as it can possibly be, as easy as it can possibly be. And I think like once you get there, it's not that regulations and governments and things will go away. Like they will not. And I think there's a lot of good regulations that can come, right? But the idea being, how do you end up in a place that is healthy? And so that like if you have law enforcement that wants to go and do his job and catch a criminal, like they still have the ability to do that. But like that doesn't mean that everybody is now under a constant surveillance regime all the time, even when it's not warranted and it's not really compliant with the Constitution, right? So I think that we can get there. I'm very hopeful, and I think non-custodial support is the number one thing that gets us there.
Listening to all of you, I'm more hopeful too. I have grown up in the traditional financial services industry and watched its centralization, even the regional banking system. When I started in the business, there were probably 25 to 30,000 regional banks throughout the United States. Now there are 4,000, and a lot of them are going to fail because of bad monetary policy. And I've also watched Washington or government become more centralized. And I think the movement that this generation has started is against that. It's in our DNA. And so, yeah, I agree on the getting the message out to the regulators. We're certainly trying to do that, ARC in terms of the papers that we write and all of the webinars that we do. But I actually have a lot of hope, because I think this movement sprung out of 0809, massive distrust in the centralization. I think one of the things from a political thing, from a politics point of view, that could happen is, let's decentralize Washington, take all the departments, and some presidential candidate has suggested this. Get Washington, decentralize all of those departments, put them in, Idaho and Georgia and everything, and get back to those roots as well. So that conversation actually has started. So I'm very hopeful.
Let's go. I'll take the bullish side as well, but from the and to echo a little bit of Kathy's point, from the bottoms up, what we're seeing on the grassroots, especially on the Bitcoin movement, how many local meetups that are being organized in these small towns, big towns, and so on. And then the folks like you guys, and not to give Tony another shout out, but build the products and services that you would want to use. Finally, there's I shouldn't say finally, there's a really good, easy to use, self-custodial Lightning Wallet app that even I can use every single day. So I dumb it down to my level that I can actually use every single day. And I'm so bullish on the next 5 to 10 years of even the next layer and next generation of all those different applications, companies, services. I mean, Graham, we didn't even touch on the number of merchants, building in the space on top of Voltage that just never even thought about Bitcoin. So glass half full for sure. And because of the folks like you guys building.
Something that I really appreciate here is if you looked at, what Desiree's been saying, what Graham's been saying, what Tony's been saying, and Alex as well, it's like you have this very global footprint around users and engagement and businesses and all that stuff, which is incredible. And there's actually a deeper point here, which is that if you look at history, right? And you look at, 1700s, 1800s, whatever, right? The people that were in power in America had very different ideals and goals and desires from like who was in power in Europe or Asia or whatever it is. Like this is the first time in history that there is a community of people that is truly global that shares the same values of like what's important to them. And so when you talk about like these are the people that are building businesses, these are the people that are, you know, engaging with communities and engaging with politicians, and it's happening all over the world at the same exact time. That's never happened before. And so we have like this incredible, and you know, thanks to a lot of the work of the folks in this room, so we have like a really incredible opportunity to change not just like local culture or like the culture of our country, but the culture of the entire planet all in one big wave. And like that's an incredible opportunity.
Well said, Victor. Yassine, my friend, we're running up now on our time. This has been amazing. Any thoughts?
I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. I'd say maybe my wrapping thoughts, Alex, you mentioned we need a cultural shift. I think the cultural shift is exactly what Victor pointed out. It's going to mean just building and creating these unstoppable tools. You know, when you think about Bitcoin is actually the perfect example of why we can be optimistic. It's like Bank Secrecy Act was started in 1970. Bitcoin doesn't really care. And so I think if you continue to have sort of the ethos of, look, let's just create these tools that are unstoppable, that are out in the wild. If you were to ask a regulator, you know, maybe in 2008, what Bitcoin might look like 10 years from now, they would have been like, we need to stop this at all costs. And the cat's out of the bag and there's nothing that they can do. I think if we continue to sort of adopt that mindset of I'm going to keep building and I'm going to throw it in the wild and let the market decide for themselves, then, you know, there's no way that you can't be optimistic. That's the first thing. And then maybe I'll wrap by saying, you know, we are arguably in, if not a bear market, a choppy market. And yet I see in each and every one of you so much passion and enthusiasm. We didn't talk about price once, which I love as well. And so when you kind of just think about, and this is why we do this, is people are building, they are aligned, they are focused, and you know they want to make kind of the world a better place. And that sounds quite cliche, but I can see it in just the way that you talk about it, and it makes me kind of really excited, and I think the future is really bright. So really appreciate you all joining. I'm sure that you will be joining you know, sometime in the near future as well. This is a rotating guests, and each and every one of you have been super insightful. So thank you guys very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
ARK believes that the information presented is accurate and was obtained from sources that ARK believes to be reliable. However, ARK does not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information, and such information may be subject to change without notice from ARK. Historical results are not indications of future results. Certain of the statements contained in this podcast may be statements of future expectations and other forward-looking statements that are based on ARK's current views and assumptions, and involve known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements.